The first evidence did not look like a drug laboratory. It looked like a black stain beneath a collapsed wall. Dr. Mira Hale crouched beside it while dawn pressed a pale line across the desert. Around her, the excavation camp still slept under canvas and dust. Thomas lifted the bowl toward the light and found its inside glazed with soot. Mira smelled nothing except earth, salt, and the cold breath of morning. The stain sat inside a sealed chamber where no food bones had been found. A ring of smooth stones surrounded it like silent witnesses. Beside the bowl lay brittle stems older than any village known from that valley. Thomas asked the question neither of them wanted to say too quickly. What if people had come here to inhale smoke before cities even existed? By noon, the chamber had become the center of the dig. Lena Voss arrived with glass vials, masks, and the impatience of a chemist who hated guesses. She scraped residue from the bowl with a blade no wider than a fingernail. Mira watched each black flake fall into the vial like a piece of burned time. Elias Ward filmed from the doorway but kept the camera low. Outside, wind rolled pebbles across the flats in soft, dry clicks. Inside, the air felt crowded by people who had vanished 10,000 years earlier. The chamber had no bed, no storage pit, and no sign of daily life. Its walls were marked by repeated fire, but the ceiling showed almost no smoke damage. That meant the flames had been small, controlled, and brief. A narrow vent opened toward the eastern horizon. When Thomas placed a strip of cloth near it, the fabric lifted as if the room inhaled. Mira imagined a circle of bodies sitting where she now knelt. She imagined smoke passing from mouth to mouth without a single written word. That evening, Lena prepared the first chemical scan. A green line crawled across her laptop while the generator coughed outside. Most of the residue was ordinary charcoal. Then a second cluster appeared where no cooking plant should have been. The sample contained alkaloid traces consistent with psychoactive vegetation. No single result could prove intoxication. Contamination, groundwater, and modern roots could mimic a miracle. Mira ordered duplicate tests from 3 separate layers. Thomas reopened the trench and found another bowl beneath the first. This one had been inverted and sealed with red clay. When he turned it over, tiny seeds clung to its rim. The seeds were crushed, burned, and mixed with resin. Elias stopped filming long enough to whisper that someone had prepared this on purpose. It was a place built around altered breath. Long before kings, temples, or money, someone had designed a room for smoke. The discovery pulled Mira backward into a world without streets. In her reconstruction, a young gatherer named Nara moved through a forest after rain. She carried roots, berries, and bitter stalks in a woven sling. Her people knew which plants stopped bleeding and which plants stopped breathing. Knowledge lived in scars, funerals, and the memory of those who survived mistakes. Nara was not searching for visions. She was searching for dry fuel before the night cold arrived. Near a fallen tree, she found a cluster of gray-green leaves untouched by insects. Then distant thunder pushed her toward camp. The settlement was no village, only hides stretched between branches beside a river bend. Children chased sparks while hunters opened a deer with stone blades. At the center sat Ketu, the oldest healer in the group. His left eye was clouded, and his hands shook only when he rested them. Nara placed the strange leaves beside the firewood. Ketu noticed the scent before he saw the plant. He crushed one leaf, touched it to his tongue, and spat immediately. Aru, his impatient apprentice, tossed a handful into the flames. The leaves curled black and released a thick, sweet smoke. Everyone nearest the fire coughed and stumbled away. A child began laughing before the coughing stopped. One hunter swore the river had risen into the sky. Nara felt the ground loosen beneath her knees. The flames seemed to open like an animal eye. K2 dragged the burning leaves from the fire with a forked branch. Fresh air returned, but the camp had already changed. One woman with a swollen ankle said the pain had faded. That single sentence was more dangerous than any hallucination. The next morning, K2 searched the ashes. He separated the gray-green stems from ordinary wood. Nara watched him choose only 3 leaves for a second test. This time, he placed them on hot stones at the edge of camp. He made everyone sit farther away. Aru held a hollow bird bone above the smoke and drew a breath through it. His face tightened, then softened. He said he could hear footsteps inside the mountain. Ketu struck the bone from his hand. No one understood dosage, chemistry, or addiction. They understood only that a plant could change pain, fear, and perception. That knowledge was powerful enough to become sacred. Sacred things are often dangerous things placed behind rules. Ketu forbade children from approaching the smoke. He allowed it only after hunts, burials, or severe injury. He counted the leaves allowed with taps against a stone. He watched the wind and stopped when the smoke grew too dense. Ritual was their first form of harm reduction. Mystery was the language that made people obey. Weeks later, a hunter named Sorrel returned with a deep gash in his thigh. Blood darkened the fur tied around his leg. The camp had no metal needle and no distilled medicine. Ketu washed the wound with boiled water. Nara heated the stone bowl until resin began to bubble. Aru added the gray-green leaves with trembling care. Sorrel inhaled through the bird bone while Ketu cleaned the torn flesh. His jaw unclenched as the smoke entered him. He still screamed, but he did not strike the healer. The wound closed beneath sinew thread. By sunrise, Sorrel was alive. The plant gained a new name that meant breath beyond pain. Names turn accidents into traditions. Traditions turn experiments into inheritance. Yet the smoke offered more than relief. During a winter burial, Ketu burned the leaves beside the body of a dead child. The mourners sat in silence as vapor drifted through the shelter. Nara saw the child's face in the moving smoke. She knew it was impossible, yet the vision steadied her breathing. Across the circle, others reached toward shapes only they could see. Grief and intoxication became impossible to separate. The dead felt near because the living had altered their minds together. A private hallucination became a shared ceremony. The ceremony bound the group more tightly than hunger ever had. Mira paused her reconstruction when Lena called from the laboratory tent. The second scan had confirmed the first. Residue from both bowls carried the same psychoactive signature. Charred seeds from the sealed vessel strengthened the case. More surprising was the resin mixed among them. The resin burned slowly and kept the active smoke trapped near the floor. Someone had engineered the experience. Thomas found polished tubes made from bird bone in a side niche. Their ends were stained darker than their centers. Microscopic wear suggested repeated contact with human lips. The oldest pipe was not a pipe in the modern sense. It was a tool for directing smoke with precision. Mira felt the discovery move from possibility toward intent. Ancient people had not merely stood near an unusual fire. They had selected, crushed, mixed, heated, and inhaled a mind-altering plant. The process required memory and teaching. It also required trust. No one enters a strange mental state safely among enemies. The chamber may have been a laboratory, clinic, temple, and council room at once. Only the need existed. Back in the imagined past, Ketu's rules began to weaken. Aru had learned where the plant grew. He had also learned that visions made frightened people listen. When storms delayed the herds, he burned extra leaves and announced that the mountain demanded obedience. Some hunters believed him. Others noticed that his prophecies always increased his share of meat. Nara watched ritual become authority. The smoke that once softened pain began to sharpen power. One night, she followed Aru beyond the river. He met two hunters beside a hidden fire pit. They inhaled until their movements slowed and their laughter turned vacant. Aru had broken every rule Ketu created. The next day's hunt ended with one man beneath a wounded boar. The animal vanished into reeds, leaving blood across the mud. Ketu found the hidden pit before sunset. Then he smashed it against a stone. He said the visions belonged to anyone brave enough to seek them. Ketu answered by pointing toward the injured hunter. Freedom sounded different beside a body struggling to breathe. The group divided around the fire. Some wanted the plant destroyed. Some wanted its use guarded more strictly. Some wanted more of it. Humanity had discovered the argument that would follow every drug thereafter. Was the substance a medicine, a sacrament, a pleasure, or a threat? The answer depended on who controlled it and who paid the price. Nara carried the remaining leaves to the riverbank. For a moment, she considered letting the current erase them. Then she remembered Sorrel surviving the wound. She remembered the dead child seeming close enough to touch. She also remembered the hunters laughing while danger gathered beyond the reeds. She divided the bundle in two. Half went into the river. Half went into a clay-lined pit beneath Ketu's sleeping place. The first drug war may have begun inside a single frightened mind. Mira returned to the chamber after midnight. She sat where one ancient participant might have sat. Still, the architecture guided her body toward the center. The vent pulled fresh air across the chamber without clearing it too quickly. This was not primitive in the careless sense of the word. It was precise knowledge built without equations. Thomas joined her, carrying a lantern. He had found fingerprints in the clay seal. Mira pictured a child pressing wet clay beside a teacher. Even secret knowledge must pass through young hands or disappear. At sunrise, the team opened the final niche. Inside lay a necklace of pierced seeds from the same psychoactive plant. Others came from distant valleys hundreds of miles away. The chamber stood on a route of exchange older than agriculture. People had traded rare plants before they traded coins. Perhaps visions were among humanity's first luxury goods. Elias asked whether this meant prehistoric people were addicts. Lena rejected the word before he finished. Addiction leaves patterns that chemistry alone cannot reveal. The evidence showed repeated use, preparation, and social meaning. It did not show craving, withdrawal, or ruined lives. Mira added that romanticizing the practice would be equally careless. Ancient does not mean wise. Sacred does not mean harmless. Natural does not mean harmless. The chamber contained control, but control can fail. The broken bone tubes proved that conflict had entered the ritual. A crushed bowl near the doorway suggested someone had tried to stop it. History rarely preserves a clean lesson. It preserves consequences scattered in dirt. The team spent 3 days mapping every stone. As they worked, a dust storm erased the horizon. Mira sealed the samples, while Thomas reinforced the chamber walls. Elias filmed the last light fading through airborne sand. The storm turned the camp into a world of shadow and breath. Mira understood why smoke had once felt like a doorway. When vision narrows, the mind supplies what the eyes cannot. By morning, the chamber had survived. Thomas brushed fresh sand away and uncovered a shallow groove leading outside. The groove ended at a field of ancient graves. That connection changed the interpretation again. The smoke chamber had faced the dead. Its eastern vent opened toward sunrise, but its doorway opened toward burial ground. Participants may have entered beside ancestors and left beneath returning light. The route itself was a ritual map. Darkness, smoke, memory, and dawn formed a sequence. No priest had written it down. The landscape carried the script. Mira's reconstruction returned to Nara one final time. Years had passed, and K2's clouded eye had gone completely dark. Aru had left with hunters who wanted stronger visions and fewer rules. Nara now guarded the clay-lined pit. She used the plant rarely. A leaf for unbearable pain. A measured breath for burial. A small fire when fear threatened to tear the group apart. She never called the visions truth. She called them visitors. Visitors could comfort, deceive, or overstay their welcome. On the night Ketu died, the group gathered inside a stone shelter. Nara placed 3 leaves on heated rock. No one reached for the bird bone. They let the smoke drift lightly through the circle. Aru returned before dawn, older and hollow-eyed. He carried a pouch filled with crushed leaves. He had seen groups farther north using the plant every night. Their children learned its smell before the smell of rain. He spoke like a man escaping a fire he had helped spread. Aru asked how she knew where use ended and hunger began. She said the body answers before pride does. Weeks later, the laboratory results reached independent reviewers. All 3 confirmed the psychoactive compounds. Dating placed the deepest bowl thousands of years before the first known city in the region. How far back does humanity's hunger for another state of mind truly reach? The first altered breath may be far older than any surviving bowl. By the time the team left the valley, the chamber was sealed again. Mira stood alone at the trench before sunrise. For one breath, dust floated through the beam like ancient smoke. She saw continuity. The people who had sat there had discovered pleasure and danger in the same cloud. The oldest lesson in the chamber was not that ancient humans got high. It was that they immediately began arguing about what the experience meant. Long before civilization rose, the human mind was already searching for doors. Smoke was one of the first doors we learned to open. We are still deciding when it should remain closed.